Remembering Andy Robertson. I knew Andy Robertson from late 1999 when I first joined a group of Brighton science fiction readers who met in the Mitre pub on Baker Street, Brighton, on the south coast of England. This revolved around the Interzone science fiction magazine, with which Andy was closely associated. I had been meaning to come for a while and finally did one Friday night to find a close-knit group in the smaller room where they liked to chat each week. Andy was an impressive presence in the corner beside a small bar that poked into the area. He spotted me with a twinkle in his eye, glad of a newcomer, and asked what I did. I showed him a small press ecology and paranormal magazine I published at the time, The Information, for which he was happy to pay the £1 cover price. Andy disagreed with some of the contents, but enjoyed reading it. "You're a nutter," he once said, "but an interesting one." Like some others in the group, such as the late Peter T. Garrett, I tended to arrive towards the end of the evening, around 10 o'clock, for the last hour of chat plus, if the landlord obliged, an occasional extension to drinking time, as licensing rules were tighter back then. Andy would often supply me with an extra half pint of Harvey's, which I tossed into my depleted pint glass. Although ostensibly an SF group, these meetings touched on many other topics such as politics, the media, history and literature. I also learnt of Andy's deep appreciation of William Blake, with whom he said I had some affinity. Andy gave me a paperback that I still have, a bizarre novel about space travel, written with a surrealist slant, called A Voyage to Arcturus, by David Lindsay, and it was certainly a great read. He would usually run me home in his car-cum-spacecraft, as I thought of it, a big vehicle like a personal minibus, and we'd share a few thoughts as far as the Preston Park garage, near my home at the time. I also enjoyed Andy's firework parties in 2003 and 2004. When I took a photo of him with his daughters and later put it in a clip frame. He had forgotten it being taken and was amazed to have it. A widower for some years, Andy relocated to Dorset in the west of England during the mid-2000s. He remarried and had 2 more children, both sons this time. However, Andy was admitted to hospital in April 2014 and passed away at the age of 58. His funeral was held in Weymouth in May, attended by his family plus friends from the science fiction world, including myself, Nigel Brown, Paul Brazier, Interzone artist SMS, and long-time collaborator on the magazine, David Pringle. On Saturday, July the 11th, 2015, a memorial service and celebration was held in Andy's former hometown of Lewes, East Sussex, with his daughters Alice and Claire, sister Deborah, and again many of his friends. We join Andy's sister Deborah Robertson at the Westgate Chapel, Lewes, before a gathering to scatter ashes on the South Downs near Andy's previous home. Later, there is music from Paul Brazier at the Lewes Arms.
He would explain patiently, "I have a larger brain capacity than you, little sis. I was a raging feminist by the time I was 80 years old. Thank you, Andy, for trying to explain the mysteries of Latin to me. Patient, rational. I had straight A's the first few weeks, and then when I took over, it was down to D, where I remained for the next 5 years. But he tried, bless him. Andrew, as we all know, was brilliant. As my sister once said, my brother has a brain the size of a planet. Years later, I looked at his school reports, and he'd been top in practically everything. He never mentioned it. I just knew that my brother knew everything, and that if he felt like lifting his head out of a book for long enough, he would explain everything. By the way, his handwriting was appalling. It was just like a Dalek's. I don't know why it's that really jerky, hieroglyphic type cuneiform thing. Well, I remember one exasperated schoolmaster wrote at the end of one of his essays, "Did you write this with knitting needles?" In the late 60s, Andy discovered Tolkien and Fairport Convention. He immediately bought Lord of the Rings and the grey hardback trilogy. They were read, reread, and treasured. Without telling anyone, he started to draw a magnificent copy of Middle-earth in inks, and I would creep into the front room and sit cross-legged on the floor, silently watching him. His pen and coloured ink scattered on the low tiled coffee table that my mum had built. He carefully measured the map to scale, rich black contours, vermilion, carmine, deep ocean blues. An illuminated manuscript, really. He taught himself Elvish, naturally, and he built the frame and wrote an inscription in Elvish around it. A labour of love. Listening to Fairport Convention with Andy in the front room, a thrilling opening moment of Town Lynn, a sailor's life, sharing the miracle of Sandy Denny's voice, singing Meet on the Ledge together, Andy thumping his thigh, earnest, heartfelt singing full of his own truth and passion, all the more planned with his slightly off-key wobble. He asked me to teach him to sing once. We imagined scales on the living room wall, and he tried to follow as I pointed to different notes with one of Mum's knitting needles. That lasted one lesson. Now, my brother, I feel, had known loneliness at times. I think an exceptional mind can be an isolating experience when young, and he could feel awkward with strangers. I remember a whippet slim, young, long-haired chap called Ken Brown turning up, as tightly wound as the long black umbrella he seemed to carry with him everywhere. I watched Andy debate, share his enthusiasms and laugh with his new friend, and I felt relief and joy that my big brother had found such a companion and compatriot. Regular music and Bible readings followed in the front room, and more desperate little sister attempts to get in, which were always foiled. I believe, or I know, that friendship rapidly became one of the deepest joys of my brother's life. His circle of friends widened to include, His circle of friends widened to include a flaxen-haired young lady called Sylvia, who became his first girlfriend. In about 73 or 74, I can't remember which, St Edmund's Hall, Oxford offered Andy a scholarship to read physics. It was fourth term, unconditional, no A-level results required, and no entrance exam. I think that he just sent up his schoolwork. A few years later, I remember receiving a phone call from Andy's tutor. His voice shook with excitement. The university had just awarded him one of the highest degrees on record. They inaugurated a prize in his honour. Despite such glittering prizes, I sense that Andy felt that happiness for him lay in a different sort of life. He began working for John Lewes as a systems analyst and bought his house in Kingsley Road. It was there that his career as the master of the revels really began. An ex-school fellow came to call, requesting sanctuary. This my brother happily offered, in return for keeping him replete with sausages and apples. They shared the house together, happily under this arrangement for a couple of years. But Pete Wolford did so much more for my brother. Mephistopheles that he was, he suggested that perhaps Andy might like to spend a little more of his respectable wage packet. Coming from a rather impoverished but not remotely humble family, Andy had learned rather frugal ways. It was Pete Wolford who corrupted my brother. Where are you? There. Let me denounce you from the pulpit, Peter. It was Peter who taught my brother how to chat up young women and exploit his good looks. And my brother's wild bachelor years of the mid-80s were down to him. So a heartfelt thank you, Peter, for teaching my brother how to have fun in various nefarious ways. In 1987, Andy walked into a pub in Lewes and sitting at the table with Sylvia and her brother. Their old love was rapidly rekindled, and in April 1988 they married in Southover. A joyful day for the sunshine and Sylvia's veil flying up in the breeze and catching on the church spire. Two daughters, Alice and Claire, arrived in 91 and 92, but after Sylvia's sad passing in 1993, Andy's family and friends joined together to support him bring up his beautiful girls. Despite wanting to strangle my brother at times, Andrew was an easy brother to love. I feel fiercely proud that I am the younger sister of such a remarkable man. Unique, brilliant, artistic, poetic, literary, pantheistic, infuriating, joyful, uncompromising, loving, fallible, deeply generous and deeply human, darling brother. I never saw my brother happier in fulfilling his role as the master of the revels, beer mug in one hand and hunk of fermenting cheese in the other, with the girls careering around way past their bedtime, in a house overflowing with books, manuscripts, armour and good people. All of you here are those good people, and to all of you who love my brother and who offered him support and friendship, on behalf of his mother and his sisters, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, I've got quite a long piece with quite a lot of memories in. So far this year I haven't actually written much about Dad because I felt like putting pen to paper would be admitting that Dad wasn't really with us anymore and it's just consigned to my memory, when a large part of me just feels that he's still around, really. I just think he's up in the next room or off for a walk or down in Dorset if I'm up in Brighton and vice versa, or just on the other side of the screen if I'm writing an email. And I find it very hard to convince myself that he's not slumped in front of his computer screen, staring in that very scary way he had at something complicated, and not listening when I called him because he was so absorbed, only to say, about 10 seconds later. I don't think I can ever write something which truly reflects who Dad was, because words, however beautifully written, are only a poor substitute for the real thing. And also I have so many memories of Dad. But I've tried to pick out a few memories, and I've tried to describe a typical weekend with Dad, circa about 6 years old. So after our Saturday morning violin lessons and Dad's Saturday morning hangover after the mitre, Nan would head back to Saltdean, and for the rest of the weekend the house was ours and we could do what we liked, and Dad would get this sort of naughty schoolboy glint in his eye. And we often used to do some baking together in the kitchen. Now, Dad's idea of baking, so Simon, we were saying this earlier, was to use only stone ground wholemeal flour and mix it using absolutely no recipe with lots of brown sugar and water to form a firm but still sticky sort of poo-like substance. We would then mould this into smaller poos and place them on a baking tray and put them in our pitch black oven that you had to actually stick your head in and light with a match. Health and safety. We baked them for about an hour and then they'd emerge almost totally inedible and rock hard. Between us, we'd nibble about a third of one and then stick the rest in a tin, never to see the light of day again. Nan would have to deal with them on Monday. This baking method didn't alter much throughout the years either. He'd also bake the same rock-hard things with Dominic and Till, and he used to joke that it was the dwarven recipe for crown. He'd also let us, if I remember rightly, crack eggs for fun and throw flour around the kitchen pretending it was snowing. But in the same session he'd try and explain to us that the best biscuit cutter to get the best use out of a piece of pastry was hexagonal, because he was always trying to teach us mathematical things. Once Dad rearranged the entire living room furniture into a pirate ship with blanket forts and we all played on it. I think Dad was Blackbeard, of course, and I was a cabin boy, and I can't remember what Alice was. Another favourite game was placing the stars on the ceiling of the sky. So we brought some glow-in-the-dark stars for our room, and Dad pretended to be a friendly sky troll, or sky giant, who had to place new stars in the heavens. We were his little trolling helpers. We climbed the huge mountain of stairs to the bedroom, and then we thought carefully about the placement of each star on the ceiling. And then we made lots of other silver stars out of foil, and Dad drew the planets for us to colour in and taught us all their names and taught us about comets and the different colours of all the stars and things like that. So after a long playing session, Dad sat me on his knee and we read Calvin and Hobbes cartoons together. I remember looking at one where Calvin and Hobbes had smashed up the entire living room playing baseball inside. Dad said, "What a mess! Do you think we've made that much mess?" I looked up and I looked down the long living room at all the misplaced furniture and Dad's shoes that we used to hop about in, pretending to be duffel puts from Narnia, and all our cuddly toys, and I thought, yes, we probably have. So from Calvin and Hobbes, we got the idea of making water balloons one very hot summer, and Dad was really delighted to discover that they don't actually burst when you drop them, they bounce for a while as they lose elasticity, and finally they burst everywhere. And he said, we had this black one that Dad said was a sinister alien monster sort of lobbing around the patio. Then Dad would retire to his pile of interzone submissions, and Alice and I would go and play up some more in our vastly overgrown garden, where Dad had installed 2 swings. This was usually by ourselves, but sometimes Dad would come up too, to be umpire for our welly wanging contests. So welly wanging is flinging wellies off one's feet in mid-swing, and you get points for distance wanged, and also for style, I believe. Yeah, how many trees you hit. But there's so much overgrown this that's pretty hard to get very far into. So when it got dark, we'd go back in and watch a Disney film, many of which Dad quite liked actually. And we'd then go upstairs, and Alice and I would snuggle up in Dad's big double bed, and he'd read to us by the glow of the lamplight. He read us more Calvin and Hobbes, and the George MacDonald stories, Alan Garner, the Chronicles of Narnia, of course, Grimbold's Other World, which is one of my favourite books, Alice in Wonderland, and The Hobbit. He tried reading us The Lord of the Rings when we were about 6. But he was so enthusiastic with his interpretation of the Old Forest, the Barrow-wights and the Black Riders, that we had to make him stop before they arrived at Rivendell. So the images conjured up in that glowing light of those princesses and woods and just beautiful images will never leave me, and I can't actually recapture them just by reading those stories. I think there's something Dad conjured up. So Sundays were a sacred day which we always spent together. We put on our wellies and jumpers in the winter, wellies and shorts in the summer, and bundle into Big Blue, our van. Hobbes, my cuddly toy tiger, would always come along as well. That's why he's here today, because Dad got him for me when I was 6, and Alice and Dad sort of surprised me with him and threw him out of jumper, and it was really nice.
You loved him dearly.
Don't you had invisible box for about a year and a half beforehand, so we had to get more of.
And then I saw him in the pet shop, toy shop, and I was like, yes, that's Hobbes. And Debbie said, can't you get this less expensive one instead? And then no, that's Hobbes. So on Sundays, if we drove west, we'd usually spend all day winding along the beautiful A272 of West Sussex, sniffing out tea rooms and stopping at innumerable hotels, pubs, parks, garages and churches, and just little hidden away places. These places would probably seem banal to an outsider, but in my mind they're infused with magic, because we were with Dad, and the 3 of us together created a kind of magic. I could probably never find these places again on a map because we call them with our own names. White Sands, the Space Monster Park, the roundy bit. And I don't really want to find them again because I'd read their true names and I'd see them with adult eyes. Of course, on these drives we would play Planet Zog, something that we're going to talk about later. And then one time when we were driving west and we played a Planet Zog game, as we always did, and something felt slightly different about this one, though it sort of was wrapping itself up more quickly than usual. And I can't remember the story exactly, but after we finished, he called to start another one, and Dad said, no, I think that was the last one, and we can't do it anymore. It doesn't feel quite right. And we protested a bit, but we knew in our hearts it was right. It just had come to its natural finish.
Planet Zog is an invented planet that we lived on the weekends most of the time. Yeah.
If we drove east, we'd often stop at a cafe and have a slap-up breakfast, or we'd go horse riding. And once Dad thought it would be a good idea to take our cat Mouse out with us for a Sunday drive, and Mouse turned up both at the cafes and at the horse riding stables, where he ran around everywhere under people's feet and hooves, but surprisingly everyone seemed to enjoy it. Later on when we drove east, we returned again and again to this one triangle of land between 3 villages. Over a period of about 3-4 years, we walked every footpath in this triangle and drove every road. It took a surprisingly long period of time. And we just talked and talked and talked. I can't begin to remember everything we talked about, but for a long period of time it was about Lord of the Rings films that had recently come out, and which Alice and I had finally read and admitted were better than Harry Potter. And so we spent many years on these walks. Most of my memories are of all of us together, but I might mention just one of just Dad and I. It was Neville Juvenile Bonfire Night, and at the Gallows was at a party, and we decided to walk over the downs together to go and watch the fireworks. And because all the punters had come from the other end of town, it was just Dad and I on the hillside. And the stars were really bright that night, and I remember looking up at them and Dad pointing out the plough. And we had a sort of thermos flask of warm juice and some gingerbread. And then Dad said, I think we're a bit close here, let's move up. And it's a good thing we did, because when the fireworks started later, one of them misfired horizontally, exactly at the spot where we've been sitting. How much time have I got? Oh, okay. So later on, Dad moved down to the West Country to live with Bonnie, and quite shortly after, our little brothers Dominic and Till came along, who are now 6 and 2, 3. 2.5. And Dad did start to get less mobile over these years because of the Parkinson's, but I still have plenty of happy memories. Going for a walk with him and Dom falling in a cow pack, boom, and driving through the beautiful Dorset countryside after a really heavy frost and the wind turned the icicles into fantastic shapes on the trees. We went fossil hunting in Lima Bay, had barbecues all together in the back garden. Dad and I watched Battlestar Galactica obsessively, and of course there would be innumerable pub lunches, which were a constant throughout pretty much all of Dad's adult life, I think, and all of the time we had together with him anyway. I think he wanted to be down in the West Country because it's closer to Arthur and Avalon, the mystical and the past. Dorset is a county of many sugarloaf hills with tiny valleys and sunken green lanes between them. Each valley is so different, and he wanted to explore and walk them all, I know. It's very sad that it wasn't to be. Dad was in some ways a naturalistic. He had a very close connection with the land and mythology. He and we in turn loved Wales. We went on holiday there several times, including a fantastic weekend at St. Bibles with the Far Isles. Dad's deep love of law and land, of Tolkien and trees, of Arthur, Welsh mountains, walking the hills, ancient stories and ancient stones, of folk music, and especially of the woods, streams, and little rivers of our own shire, has given me a deep and abiding love of nature in the countryside, which I'm very happy to have inherited from him. As I campaign on environmental issues, I'm driven by that love and that need to protect. Dad was really excited for me last year when he heard I was going to the Isle of Man for a dolphin and whale monitoring placement in the spring, just before he passed away. I stayed in a very Dad place, complete with a castle, the Viking burial site, and a Viking reenactment festival as well, and I think he would have loved it. I'm so proud Dad has left such a legacy creatively as well as personally. The most beautiful thing he gave me in terms of my future was his love and desire for me to be happy. He was proud of my Oxford degree and other achievements, but I think above all else, he just wanted me to have a happy life filled with love and good simple things. Family and children, home, nature, pubs, books and stories that you create yourself and those you pass on from someone else. Master of the Rebels, which is a song sung by Dad.
Written by Clive James and Peter
For I am the master of the rivers, and whatever things to earth I will see. I will work myself to death for introduction, and the world's greatest soul. I have nothing to smile. For I am the master of the rivers, and mastery demands a certain style. In my office and the blueprints of the first exploding passion, and the charter trajectories of frustrated hands. The heart winds and different kinds of laughter, the color line, the color of the lights. Some of the windows darkened in the evening, and never Lancaster in the heavens, and I am here for your instruction and
You stand up and talk about science fiction, and the principle is and other books, mainly science fiction, though really, mainly. But the principle of the Odyssey meeting was to have a speaking object, and whenever we held the meetings at our house, it was often hot and being gentle with him. And we thought if anyone does want to say anything about Dad, I'll fling a copy away at you. But you don't have to. I don't know if it's possible. But then there might be a little bit of passing. Does anybody want to say anything at all? Or just have a couple?
I'll say one thing I know. One, never apologise for true emotion. Two, I know for absolutely certain your dad still loves you and he's incredibly proud of what you are. And there's no question about that.
When I met Andy in 1976, he walked into my shop and said, "Is there a science fiction section?" I said, "No, the whole shop's science fiction." He went, "Ah, I found somewhere I can live." Years later, I joined the thing and there would have been more of us here, but you chose the second Saturday of the month, which is when the things are held, which is why there wasn't more of it. On visiting your home, it was full of books. Books were a staple of Andy's life. He went to conventions and bought them. He went to shops and bought them. They gave him a form of peace, which, by the sound of it, he enjoyed passing on.
That's lovely, thank you.
Well, there's a most abiding memory. There's many sort of like ding-dong discussions in the pub, fueled by beer and ill-formed opinion. But the thing that's struck me that Andy was a very special person and a good friend, and really touched me is when this one was born, Andy came round and he had this sheepskin rug, and we mentioned this at the picnic earlier, which he wrapped his own children in. And that's what we used to change his nappy on. And it's quite sort of, I just like that idea, that continuity. I just remember when he gave it to me, because he so obviously, as you can see by the photos, he adored his own children. He understood what a special moment it was for us. So there's that kind of understanding that he had of what was really important.
I used to love wrapping the girls up in sheepskin blanket and then just wrap up his poggies in various blankets and wrap them right up. When Andy would come and collect them, he'd have a few days off and we'd look after the girls and have a bath and we were sleeping, asleep, and Andy'd come and collect them. And he'd just bundle one up, say Alice up first, and a crochet blanket, one little poglet ready to put into the van, and wrap the little poglet up. So that's lovely because he really loved the whole idea of swaddling them.
To pass that on, we've known each other a couple of years. It's just to show the generosity of spirit and make him an easy man to love.
Thank you.
Who else wants the...
Hobbs.
Speaking of...
Just want to ask a question, really. Claire mentioned Disney films, which were watched presumably on video. But I know one of the things that impressed me about Andy's child rearing, viewing it from a distance, was that he was very strict about television, wasn't he? He didn't allow you to watch television at all. No. It was only there so he could play videos carefully chosen, such as Disney videos beforehand.
He actually made it impossible for us to watch television, because I remember the first and last time watching television in 38 hours, I was probably about 3, and I went to the supermarket with Nat, and I came back, and I'd been watching Sesame Street, and I switched it on, and it didn't work. And Nana said, "Andy, what's happened to the television?" And he said I couldn't stand it anymore, so I went up onto the roof and I hit the aerial on the head with a hammer. So yeah, we couldn't But yes, it was nice that we could watch videos, but much better that we could watch any telly.
I think it was one of the great gifts Andy actually gave them, because watching them grow up, they just spent so much time writing and playing and writing plays, and just it could have been a childhood out of any century, really, because there was so little there was very select technology, but then it was put back in its place, and their mind, created, which I think is a wonderful thing, to allow a child just to be a child.
Yeah.
I think he got that. Yes, I can imagine that. Find another window.
He just told me it was broken. He didn't say that he'd broken it himself.
He lies.
No, that was his lie that he told them.
I'm sorry.
This is a small memory, but Andy always used to stand out wherever he was. In 93, at our wedding, reception was in Horniman's garden in a nice greenhouse. It's Mr. Horniman's. Sarah, you may remember. My sisters-in-law, both very prim and very proper, very sure about the right way to do things. And about halfway through the reception, I was told that we thought we had a gate crasher. He was a very tall chap, and he didn't have combed hair. And in the wedding photos still, there are only two people with hair that unkempt, and it's Ken. And far outdoing Ken is Andy.
Very proud. He wasn't wearing a short for a minute.
No, he was in a shirt, reasonable trousers.
Did he have shoes on?
He had shoes on. He was using the notion that time is relative, so he could turn up when it was appropriate, which is why they thought he was a gate crasher.
He did well then, really.
Yeah. No, he looks smart, very smart, really. For those of us who knew him.
His own way. Thank you.
Anyone else for a tiger, or shall we wrap up? I've got the thing I'm going to read, but I will...
You want to say anything? Juliet, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, why not?
Something's bubbling up.
Yeah, just say Andy's a great guy. Great to go to the MITRE meetings, have a chat with him, and sell him my very cheap little zines for £1, which he always wanted to give more money for, and I generally turned down. And thanks for all the drinks and stuff, and good to be here today. Yeah. Anybody else got that? There you go, Paul.
I'm now going to get on the video.
I can film you if you like.
Yes, I'm turn around the other way.
Right, there you
go. That's better. I've never cuddled this bear before.
He's a tiger.
I know he's a tiger. Andy told me all about something under the bed he's drooling. I don't have a specific memory of Andy. Andy was a friend, and he married Sylvia and had these two gorgeous girls, and they were just there as a presence in our lives. They're always there. I've got a big album full of photographs to show off later on. But the first time we actually met, I think we met at something like a Novacon, and he and I decided to change name badges, and nobody noticed. Graham seems to know.
No, I said, Paul, I know you.
Yes. Oh, I see.
Because I couldn't remember, because I'd only met him once before.
Right. Well, so that was the kind of man he was.
He enjoyed creating confusion.
He did, yes. He was a wonderful man. And I just feel we could have done more. Could have done more, seen him more, but, all we can do is share our memories now. So let's get on and do that. Does anybody else?
Debbie, it was you who reminded me of this, that one of the Guy Fawkes parties, and for ages, because I had been trying to remember the words of a poem, and it was the Rolling English Drunkard and the Rolling English Road, and I thought, who would know it? Andy. G.K. Chesterton.
Oh, was it?
Yes. And I always... He was such a Chesterton character. Andy was, yes. He Chesterton could have written about him, except he'd never met him.
I haven't identified quite strongly.
Yeah. Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, please, sweetheart. Yes, please.
That's all right. It's just more comfortable. I'm going to try and keep this a little bit briefer than perhaps it is. Well, I don't know. So, hello. I thought about looking at what I wrote a year ago, but then I decided that I couldn't or shouldn't, or maybe both, because the funeral was the funeral. And anyone who was there will remember that my little eulogy was accompanied by a torrent of tears and a great big shroud of snot. But today is today instead. And it's been a really odd year, with Dad passing away and then the loss of Ken so shortly afterwards. And then all of it back off to Oxford to do my finals, because I've finally wrapped up my modern languages degree. Claire, although she's younger, actually overtook me and already has her first in biology, but I get my results this week. So it's been very stupid and quite strange and counterintuitive to have to concentrate on academia, which at Oxford can be quite cold and quite fraught. And that's utterly alien to everything that Dad taught me about literature and learning and, well, about life as well. But now that this year is over, I intend to think and hopefully to write about Dad a good deal, because today, for me, is in many ways a sort of beginning and not an end. It's the beginning of a kind of different phase of life, and that's a life which I hope, and I think for me will be a long process of telling stories, and those are stories which inevitably will be about Dad, because that's what he gave me, above and beyond all else. Once, when I was about 14, I think, I showed him something I'd written, and he turned and he fixed me with a sort of piercing, considering gaze, a bit like this. He used to do a face a bit like that. And he said, "Hey, you can write." And I knew he meant it, at least at that moment, because Dad really didn't praise a thing if he didn't think it was worth praising, and he was really capable of turning around and saying instead, "I'm afraid, dear little daughter, that this is crap." But I'm really glad that I impressed him, at least at that moment, and I really do hope one day that I might write something that will be a bit longer and that might merit his frank and unadulterated approval. I mean, we've talked so much about our memories and about our childhood, and that was what I wrote about last year at the funeral. For me, all of our sort of memory stories have collected in these sort of funny piles in this expanded place in my head, and it's a place which looks a lot like the house where I grew up, which a lot of you will remember, 38 South Way. And I think there's a really lovely symmetry to the funeral last year and then to this celebration now, because it's one occasion for weeping and one for laughter. And it's also lovely to return to Lewes and to the Downs and to the Sussex Weald, which is all part of the sort of map of our lives and our memories together. And I think Dad would be, well, I know Dad would be thoroughly chuffed to see you all here today, so thank you so much for coming along. I'm just going to briefly read out something that I stumbled across when I was Googling as a distraction from revising for my finals at Oxford. It's from Greg Egan's novel Distress. This is the author's note. Egan is an Australian SF writer, and he still writes now, and he's quite mysterious. There aren't any photographs of him online.
That's right.
He has no website, which is really admirable to have achieved and sort of retained by 2015. I'd love to contact him, but anyway, this is what I found just at random. This is about his novel. Among the many works which have inspired me in the writing of this novel, I must single out Dreams of a Final Theory by Stephen Weinberg, Culture and Imperialism by Edward Said, and Out of the Light, Back into the Cave by Andy Robertson. Into Zone 65, November 1992. And Egan also adds that one passage of his novel was inspired by Aimé Césaire's Cahiers d'un retour au pays natal, which, and I will turn to all of these names in a minute because some of them are less known perhaps. Anyway, when I came across this, I think that I just laughed and laughed and laughed, not because it was funny particularly, but because it just made me feel joyful and chuffed. I'm going to use that word again because it really was one of Dad's favourites, and it just sort of resonates. Dad was often chuffed when he was happy. I think that we have in this description a really wonderful coalescence of names, and that really made me swell with pride, and moreover it reminded me of one of the most valuable things that Dad taught me. So Stephen Weinberg, is a Nobel laureate in physics, and of course we know that Dad took one of the highest berths on record for his degree. And then we also have Edward Said, who is the founder of post-colonial literary criticism, and that's not a name that you can avoid studying and respecting when you do the degree that I've just been doing. And then we have Césaire, who was a Martinican poet and politician, and he was the first black student to study at the ENS in Paris, which is France's top university, and I was actually lucky enough to study there last year on my year abroad. So I often sat in the Salle Césaire listening to my French lecturers. Anyway, so you have these three great names, which I think somehow represent both Dad's time studying at Oxford, this Nobel physicist, and my time too. Of course, these are great names. And, you know, Dad was irritatingly bright, as we all know, and he was offered a place at CERN to research particle physics. It's the largest research centre for particle physics in the world. And luckily, his health didn't permit it, because if he'd gone, I don't think we would be here. Should be a bit of a shame for me. And Dad often said that he wished he'd spent his Oxford years down the pub instead of doing physics, and he definitely made up for lost time. But Dad was, I think, chuffed again when Claire and I got into Oxford. He was very, very chuffed when Claire got her first in biology, and I think that whatever mark I get, hopefully he'd be chuffed, because if I end up getting a good mark, he'd be happy anyway, but if it's not as good as his and Claire's, then he'd still be really chuffed to be able to tease me relentlessly for it, I think. So either way, he'd be happy. And actually, I think one of the things that perhaps pushed his happiness beyond being chuffed in the last year of his life, at least in my relationship with him, was when I got to tell him that I would be living in Tolkien's old bedroom for the final year of my degree. And I've actually kept Dad's ashes in Tolkien's bedroom all year long, and I really liked thinking that each ghost has enjoyed the other's company. And so back to Egan's dedication. I know it's quite an odd thing to go with, but for some reason it's just what I wanted to write about. We've got the Nobel laureate in physics, and Edward Said, and Césaire, and then Andy Robertson, his little story. And there he is, sandwiched between a Nobel Prize-winning physicist and one of the most important literary critics of the 20th century. And this is really just my long-winded way of showing what Dad taught me and what Oxford did not teach me. And that's simply that generic categorisations and schools of thought and movements and literature with a capital L are all very well and good, but it's far, far better just to speak of loving some books and not loving others. And I think that Dad, like all truly bookish people, saw writing and books as inseparable from conversation, from the stories that we make out of stories, and hence his delight in beyond things, and hence his dialogue with William Hope Hodgson's work in his Nightland project, which Paul and SMS and others are continuing, and hence his support of other writers and his work on Interzone, and his reverence of certain books and certain writers who conceive of books as just one big chat about books, really. And also, hence his unshakable soppiness. I mean, he was soppy about anything, really, about his family and himself, but he was also candidly sentimental about anything aesthetic, be it a beautiful formula or just a beautiful book. I remember him weeping when he tried to describe to me why I should read Cordwainer Smith's A Game of Rat and Dragon. I haven't actually read it yet, but I really should. I'm going to. I promised. I've been busy. Dad just really couldn't hide his love of things when he loved things. And I think that that ability to say and to show, I love this person or that book, this is a good thing, this is fine and great and noble, I think that that is a thing that is increasingly lacking in the world that we live in, and I think that it feels less actually present in my life since Dad passed on. And it was just marvellous to see Dad's name rubbing elbows with, Edward Said and a Nobel physicist, because it's as though they're equals in some way, because I think that literature with a capital L is really nonsense, and it's actually just stories, and that writing is a great leveller and a giant dialogue and a great big confabulating circle. And along with dreams, writing is the only way I will continue my conversations with Dad, and I have Dad to thank for that.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Lovely. Chuck used to say, proud as Satan. A lot about the girls. He was always proud as Satan.
Now, there's a bit less of him in here than we thought, and everyone's welcome to scatter a little bit up here, if anyone who wants to. Yeah. But we've saved plenty to go on Mum's grave in the countryside, so we won't empty him entirely.
No.
No.
Wait, does anybody want to say anything?
I love Dad. Okay.
I love you too, Dad.
Oh,
down.
nice.
Oh.
Let's do a bit. Let's go up there, go where it's sunny. Roam around.
It's on the upland.
It's on top of the hill, above Lewes.
Warned you.
Grey ash blowing in the wind.
Does anyone else want to throw some of Dad?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to do a bit, Pete?
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Please be careful with them. Oh, they're fine. Everyone's fine.
Still owe me a pint. I'm not sure he does, but I thought I'd say it. We can back see that.
Any more? Paul, would you like to throw some of Dad? No. Are you sure?
No? I'll do it.
Nice.
That's David Pringle.
Well,
Vote
the
design.
wind's so strong it bloody just comes out and he's going, yeah.
Good view of our shadows here.
Yeah, it's good.
It's just low a bit further away.
No, it's gorgeous, it is. It's like, this is, in effect.
For any more? There's a good amount. He's quite a big man.
I'm feeling a bit
This is only half as well.
Oh no, okay.
It's quite intense. And funny.
Got to get a bit of wind behind it.
Well, it is. Part of it's just the container.
Hold the top, there we go.
Yeah, you know, but you do it.
It's quite a technique.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sam.
Yeah.
Make sure hold the top and...
Oh, make sure I've got a good grip over it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
There's lots, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm not going to be possessive.
Why could you have another go? I only put a little bit down.
Hold on.
I was too frightened that there wouldn't be enough left to your mum.
There's the thingy come out.
What, the top thing?
Yeah.
There's a lid.
Yeah, the problem was before it was I just did half the sort of little thingy, and now it's more open.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Just be careful with it. Yeah.
Right, how much is there? Do you want to leave it at that? We do need plenty for Sussex, don't we?
Yeah, because along lots of places to take him. Yeah.
Right, where's his lid?
Just over there. It's all right.
I'm covered in Dad.
Could we gather you all together for?
Yes, please.
Paul Brace is taking some photos.
Oh, not in the sunshine there.
Well, we're facing the sun.
Oh yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it.
Go on, Teddy. Photo time.
Everybody
You're
in.
you're tall.
Can't see a
Squinting,
thing.
actually.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, squinting's not allowed.
Teddy, tell me off.
Kind of impossible with
It's
the
quite
sun
tricky with this sun,
directly
actually,
in you.
Yeah.
We're both got
Yeah.
Teddy, look at the camera. That's it.
It's just
Right, I want a volunteer to come and take my picture in this group.
Yes.
I'll do it.
Probably not me though, because I'm an important one.
Do I need? I'm
Yeah.
I haven't got reading glasses with me.
No, it's fun.
It's not actually a travel guitar, it's a child's guitar.
I'll take that travelling.
Well, that's what I've done. But I have another guitar for travelling.
A friend of mine gave me, lent me.
And it's good night from the Lewes Arms on Saturday, July 11th, 2015.
Oh, it's great. I knew that would come.
I'll have your chance. You'll have your chance. Hey, look, the guys.
They were
Well done. Cheers.
They got you to go on your cycling, just make a touch of their face. Constant.
Oh, good night. Oh,
Brazier.
According to my economist, he's a professor. He said the body's designed for 40 years. 40 years it's not going downhill. We're all in denial. You do get in denial. I am in total denial. I haven't got glasses. But the same prescription as 5 years ago. It hasn't changed. So what was the same? The body's designed for 40 years. That is how the body is designed to last 40 years. And from that age, that's when your eyesight starts going downhill.
Why don't we evolve?
Oh, God, I don't know. Well, not for me.
Well, we are, but it's a slow process. Come on, well, I mean, intelligence seems to be useful.
I'll tell you where I go, what's it's all in it's down a Sackville Road, it's called Barnard.
Someone's
Total squeeze me tight.
I always have to minute one.
So we do.
And they go right, you know.
When night comes in,
Like that, they can see.
But I mean, a lot of it's.
They really do. They
I'm
do
starting
deal
on one because the program. I don't want to know if there's anything.
it's gonna need.
From here.
Well, I'm so bad.
design glasses and all the names. I normally get an end of rain. They know I used to go in.
Some lips.
The kids, they have a stigma, which is tunneled.
To feel next to mine.
And they'd have all the best designer glasses.
You don't have to worry about
cheap end of rains, cheap ones.
Standing between my lights alone.
What does it mean?
It's time to go.
The point is
Justifying things by the ultimate result.
It's what I need.
Roughly speaking.
You're so bad. So why don't you give it up?
we may become more or less intelligent. The point is that
Send it home to me. Write it on a piece of paper, baby. So it can be read to me. Tell me that you love me. Stop driving me mad. All because I need your love so bad.
Time, doesn't it? It goes forward in time, doesn't go backwards in time.
I need a cell phone. Talk to me at night. You don't have to worry, baby. Said everything's gonna be alright. Listen to my plea.
yeah, I couldn't possibly comment to be a full atheist.
Bring it to me.
I can't.
'Cause I need your love so bad.
There is, I don't see any reason to believe
I don't think it's anything wrong with having faith. I think extremism is dangerous. Well,
How much do you regard of it? That's humans fucking it up.
I don't think people have faith if they have a problem in life and they want to have faith. And much feel
Great.
Just say, there come a day.
Actually, was your dad now? He must have been on something. Smiling away, because he knows. Well, we just going like that to the crowd, like that, all the time. Like he even sang. I think the kids were a bit disappointed because they were singing. But, you know, the number of times I've seen Bob Dylan, you never listen to his sound the same twice anyway.
No. My friend.
Again, the lyrics there, you know. There's no telling on the new time. I really like that.
That's a very small amount of dope on that breath. That's all I've heard.
For about 25 years in Holland.
Yeah, I played with it.
If I'm being honest with myself, I can't say I've had really backed that up. I've always wanted it, but some small one, things to me, things to be going overall the right direction, and that's let's leave it at let's be a big picture, let's be a source of underlying meaning,
Used to say, there come a day when there is something or other's going friends have died, blown up the mountain with the wind. We're gonna meet on the ledge, we're gonna meet on the ledge. If you really mean it, you'll come home again. Meet on the ledge, we're gonna meet on. I wish I knew the words.